This is One Ogden. I'm John Miles. Brent Strate was a teacher of history and social studies at South Ogden Junior High and Bonneville High School until his retirement just a couple of years ago. He's also served on the South Ogden City Council, and he currently serves on the State Board of Education.
Start teaching at South Junior High?
Yes. That was my first school, 1991.
And you were a history teacher?
Yeah.
So,
I coached football, basketball, track.
Right.
I did all of that too.
Yeah, so you were influential on us because you were like this teacher who would, let us mess around and stuff. One time
You guys played some jokes, I know.
we did. Well, we taped our faces over your family's faces on your desk.
Yeah.
And you came up and talked to us later that day. You said, hey,
Because you put the tape on the actual picture.
Right. Yeah, we ruined your picture or something, right? So I just asked Jody about this. He remembers it too because I think it was it was the first time we had, an adult had to tell us that our jokes had, hurt them, that kind of thing. And I imagine that's got to happen a lot in junior high specifically.
It even happened in high school.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a group, they called themselves a Domo Club.
Uh-huh.
And the last thing they'd do every day is they'd wad up a piece of paper and Domo me.
I see.
But what was really funny is it was my birthday, and we were watching a film, and administration came up to sing me happy birthday. But the Domo Club decided they were going to give me a little bit of grief. And so I had to run over to Porter's room just real quick, came back, and there's underneath my desk and underneath my table. And they're hiding under there. And I turned the light on. I said, well, what's going on? At that very moment, in March is the principal, and the rest of the class, they are covering. They are getting the attention of the principal because I have these kids underneath my... What is going on in here? But anyway, those kids came through. They sang my happy birthday so loud. They were so energetic, and when they went to leave, they just made sure they kept the eye contact with them so they wouldn't see him underneath the desk and that, goofing around. Well, here they are, juniors in high school, goofing around. And we laughed so hard once they left.
Uh-huh. You just really allowed, jokes and, you let people mess around, to a certain point. Yeah. And, is that a choice? It's it helps create a certain kind of relationship.
So my first 2 years were exhausting. I was coaching all those sports. I was teaching, and I put a lot of effort into it and a lot of preparation. And about year 2, I said to myself, whatever happens, every day you're going to have fun. Because if you can't make this fun for you,
right,
you're going to have a miserable 30 years. And I still was very serious about preparation. But if you don't have engaged students, if you can't engage them, especially with 8th grade boys, they are full of this. And if you don't give them a little leeway, they're going to rebel.
Yeah, if you can't play a little bit, I wouldn't even want to be there. That kept me wanting to go to school.
And it wasn't perfect because I've always been in the community business. You got to keep parents happy. You got to keep students happy. I mean, I even tried basketball officiating after coaching. You're trying to keep everyone in the gym happy, which you can't, which you don't.
Officiating, that's a whole
and of course, the state school board has been a whole new level. There was controversy in South Ogden City Council. About the second and third year, we had a drug rehab come in right in my backyard, and a lot of people were upset. But I found that regardless of my opinion and how I voted, if you let people talk to you and you gave them the time, because so many people would call and say, hey, I am so sorry to bug you. And I would say, when I ran for the job, I knew what I was getting into. I would love to talk to you as long as you wish. And when you did that, your decisions didn't, and how you voted and how you viewed, they came to respect that regardless of that. But if you won't listen to them, if you won't talk, if you put up a barrier, you're done.
Right.
State school board has been really tough. That's been my toughest gig.
Really?
I came in during COVID. That's when they had drive-up voting in Davis County.
Uh-huh.
And took office in 2021. The previous board that last year had just been grief after grief after grief. But we came in, and critical race theory becomes a big thing. I'm still trying to figure that one out. Wearing masks. There's a big push saying there's pornography in our schools. And so it's just one controversy after another.
It's interesting. I was wondering if you would get more like citizen lobbying on the city council versus the state school board, because I don't know if, like, do people, I mean, apparently they do, but like they think to lobby the school board like that? Like it's that same kind of...
Well, very little of it's face-to-face. And that's probably been the biggest challenge for me, because if I can meet someone face-to-face, they come away a lot different than if we're having emails going back and forth.
Right.
City council, a lot of it's face-to-face. Most people just say, hey, I trust you. I know who you are. I know you're working on my behalf. If you need to raise taxes, raise taxes.
On the state school board, you're elected from a district, but you do represent the whole state, right? So people from throughout the state will contact you also?
And the districts are incredibly large.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like a Senate seat for Congress, but it's 2 state Senate areas. That's how big. We have 15 members. There's 29 senators. There's 75 representatives. So 15 in the 75 is 5. So there's 5 House districts in each school board member's area.
Wow.
But you're right. It does affect the entire state. And so we try and, if something comes across and it's for Southern Davis County, then I'll often kick it down to them. Or I had someone call me from Tooele the first year when there was a little conflict over the new full-day kindergarten. And there were some issues there. And I just said, hey, you know what, let me listen to you, let me understand a little bit more, but I'm going to give you the contact information for the board member who serves your area, which I did. And so we try and pass things around that way. We have a few board members that like to stick their nose into other people's districts and actually go there and talk. And so there's been some conflict that way.
Huh. Do the district lines, they align with like school district lines?
Yeah, so this will make a lot of sense for those who are in Weber County. My area includes all of the area that's covered by Bonneville High School. Now, it wasn't exactly that way when I first ran. The district was a little bit different. They just moved me a little further north. 80% of my area is Davis. Northridge, Layton, Clearfield, and Syracuse. So those boundary areas are in my area.
Okay. And so then does it involve working with the districts pretty close, the school districts?
So I try and keep myself engaged with both Davis and Weber, and even with charter schools. Charter schools are public schools, so I want to make certain that they feel like I represent them, because sometimes people separate traditional public schools and charter schools.
Right.
And yeah, there's differences, but there's more commonality, especially now than there ever has been.
Sometimes it would seem like people were trying to resist charter schools and stuff, but it seems like we really kind of embrace it more, right?
I would say that's true, because they are public schools. They have the same requirements. And initially, that was part of the push back and forth between the charter schools and the public schools, the traditional public schools, because charter schools are public.
Right.
But things have improved. For example, making certain the finances are in order at the charter schools has become an important function. A few years back, we had a charter school fell, and they had to be bailed out.
Right.
And so what happened is there was rule put in place where basically charter schools would fund an account that would take care of issues like that when they arose.
Yeah, right, because as I understand it, it's like there's maybe a certain amount of oversight that would be done by a school district, but the district doesn't necessarily do that over charter schools. Is that right?
No, they don't. And that becomes a real challenge, because in Weber School District, we have a lot of resources available as a result of For example, special education. There's a lot more resources involved at the LEA, the district level, than at some charter schools, and yet they're under the same obligations of the law. And most of that is federal law when it comes to those types of things. So there's some challenges.
Yeah, how does that work? Like, is the State Board of Education is just sort of one funnel of money, and there's kind of the local school boards that are maybe another, in the state legislature, and even the federal government, right?
Yeah, and there's lots of places it's coming from. And, there's those who say, well, let's get all the federal money out of it. And I say, I'll support that 100% when we fund it.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of the things that are with us today come from the civil rights era. And because everyone wants to push states' rights, and I am absolutely a proponent of states' rights. I think sometimes we have too much federal government oversight. But when we had segregated schools, and the president had to call it the National Guard in Little Rock to as far as when they desegregated Little Rock High School, they were there to protect the constitutional rights of those black students.
Right.
And that is where the federal government does have an absolute right. And of course, I always point back to the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment, which was drafted right after the American Civil War, guaranteed equal protection of the law for all people. How do you achieve that equality? Well, unfortunately for states, some states have resisted doing the right thing and have found themselves at odds with the federal government over constitutional protections. And so, all things being equal, I want local government where it's right next to the people. And you think about it, city government, water, sewer, roads, garbage collection, some of the most basic needs and things that people need every day that don't think much about it, those things come from local city government. And then you move up to the county, and you move up to the state, and then the federal government. There's some great protections of the rights of states. I believe in that. But we also must protect the individual rights. And sometimes the government has to step in, the federal government.
Right. But I mean, the rationale behind the idea is more that you just take the money that the federal government does put into it and just really give it to state boards. Isn't that kind of the rationale behind us not needing a national board of education?
Right, but whenever you give money, there's accountability. Because it's not my money. It's the people's money. And we all pay for it. For example, we all pay for schools, whether we even have children or not.
Right.
Because it's good for society. An educated society are better citizens. I always said when I taught social studies, I had two main goals. I want all my students to be successful economically. I want them to be contributing to the economic welfare of our nation, because when economics break down, when people are hungry, they rebel. And we see that. I mean, if you look at after World War I, Germany was forced to pay reparations. They had to take total responsibility for the war. And many historians say that World War II began the day after World War I ended, when they signed the Treaty of Versailles, which was actually longer than one day. But the concept is that here we are in a situation where we need prosperity. We need economic prosperity. That is foundational. And we need good citizens. So I want students to understand the Constitution. I want them to understand their rights. I want them to be willing to stand up to them. And I also want them to be successful, because in so many different ways, because one leads to the other. And they are intermingled together.
So I'm really curious about that, because you mentioned CRT coming up, as on the board, and there's got to be a lot of things like that come up. And I would think that your time as a history teacher really informs your opinions on that. And the other thing that comes to mind is that also I know that the state board became partisan races not too long ago, and so I'm just curious about those things and how they how has it been forming an opinion on something like CRT where you may not have before.
Well, there's been many things that have happened as a result of that. One, the board became more political. Now, by becoming more political, now we identify. Now, we have not gotten to the point where we sit by a political party in our boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
We never really talk about it that much, but it is affecting it. Because what you saw in 2022 is a strong push from ultra-conservatives to take control of the board.
Mm-hmm.
And in some instances they were successful in doing that. That has caused a stronger pull. However, one thing that's occurred also is that on most issues, we get between 60 and 80% of board members voting in the middle.
Oh.
Yeah. So those on I don't think we have anyone on the far left.
Mm-hmm.
We have some on the far right. Most everyone is fairly moderate, and most have the belief that when it comes to education, education is for everyone. Libertarians, Republicans, Democrats, whatever it is, we have a mandate and a constitutional responsibility to provide an equitable education, an equal education for all students, regardless of race, creed, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important element of what I think the board is. I think we lost a little bit when we became more partisan. However, what we saw in 2022 is an engagement by people who weren't identifying as Republican or Democrat, just friends of education. And there's a lot of that out there. They are putting their stamp on the election of school board members. If you go back 5-10 years ago, those groups existed. They weren't even paying attention to school board races. School board races have all of a sudden become much more popular. There were races that went into $40,000, $50,000 range, which is a lot for a school board race. And so, but it's kind of equaled out that money because we lost some really, really good state board members to the partisan push, which was kind of taken over, But CRT, I'm still trying to completely figure it out. But I was on standards and assessment for the first 2 years on the board, and we did the pre-K through 8 social studies standards, which I was right in the middle of. And I would say, okay, show me where there's CRT. And an example would come up, and I still don't completely understand what they're seeing there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I talked to all the history teachers at Bonneville. We get together once in a while, and they said, we didn't even know what that was until they started talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
We had to look it up.
Right.
And so I think the idea that communism is infiltrating, or communist ideology is infiltrating our schools, and it's being driven by the system, I just don't see the evidence of it. Now, I'll always say, I can, in general, defend education and the quality of people there, but I specifically can't protect, because there are people out there, there are bad people out there. There's bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I support, in general, education 100%, but I know that there are specific instances where there's bad characters, and they might even be trying to push things that are harmful to children.
Yeah, right. How does public input work with the board? Is it are there public meetings?
Oh yeah, so so next Thursday and Friday, 7th and 8th, is board meeting, and we meet for the entire day. We even went to 3 a.m. a couple months back.
For 2 days too.
And the second day is committee meeting.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll usually have a work meeting in the afternoon on Friday. It is becoming, since I've been on the board, making it through the agenda has become a challenging issue. Even the consent calendar gets argued, gets debated.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
There's boogeymen behind almost everything. And I know what that's like. When I was on the city council, there was a time period where I didn't trust anything.
Uh-huh.
And so that really taught me a lesson, though, that I figured out as time went on, as I gained perspective, that I was seeing what I wanted to see sometimes. So that was a real lesson to me, to make certain that I didn't get too emotionally wrapped up in an issue to where I couldn't trust the people that worked alongside me. That's really hard on staff. City managers often get fired by inexperienced city councils because they somehow think that the city manager is doing something nefarious. And I think it's difficult sometimes for people to look at someone and say, hey, I serve on city council. I get $800 a month, and we're paying that clown $140,000 a month. What makes them worth that?
Right.
But as you move through, you understand the extent of their work, the dedication to what they're doing, and so I don't make comparisons like that anymore because we have the superintendent of public education in Weber School District. We have a teacher. Some people say, well, they should make the same amount of money. I think leadership does have value.
Yeah.
And when you serve on a board, you are a servant of the people. You didn't run to make a lot of money. You ran to serve. And regardless of political affiliation, I can say that, and I can defend this, that all 15 members of the board are doing what they think is right. Now, I think 2 years from now, some of those board members will have a different perspective.
Yeah.
I think I was lucky that I had 10 years of service at South Ogden City as a council member, made some mistakes, and wasn't perfect. But I think it helped me understand that very concept.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about that. If we could jump back to that,
Sure.
What was what made you say I'm going to go from teacher to city council?
Well, Mayor Porter,
Uh-huh.
he taught right next door to me at Bonneville. He was a baseball coach, and they relieved him from baseball coaching, and I wasn't too many years after that, and I've always been involved. From a young child, my parents were heavily involved in their community. Both my parents were engaged, and Dad served on the city council, and he had an experience that had caused him to really say, I need to do this because I need to make a difference. He was an ecclesiastical leader, and he performed a graveside in the cemetery, a little town called Spring City, and a soldier from the Vietnam War was having their service, and there was a color guard there. My dad looked at the surroundings, and it was just weeds and dirt, the cemetery. And so Dad got elected, and he made it a point to get some grants. And they put in a water system. They had to dig it all the way from town, all the way down through the fields. Some of those fields were his. And they put water to that cemetery. And he just passed away a year ago. And sorry, as I was there for his graveside, I looked over that beautifully green, lush cemetery, and thought he'd be proud to see that what's occurred as a result of his efforts. And Spring City is a little historic town, and my mom actually she started what was called Heritage Days, where you can tour some of the older homes throughout the city. It's really Memorial Day weekend. It's just an incredible event. But really, I loved coaching, and I was coaching football and coaching basketball and coaching track and heavily involved in things, and I got relieved of, and that's what happens to coaches. I got relieved of those responsibilities. They don't like you to quit, but they like to get rid of you once in a while.
Yeah, they might ask.
And I thought I've got to do something, and so I ran for South Ogden City Council, and I won. And I wouldn't have won though, and I think this is an important point. Is John Bradley? He was a great council member, and he said, "I've served. I never intended to continue. I filed just to make certain that someone was running, but I see that other people have thrown their hat in the ring." And so he stepped down at the end of his second term. And I almost stepped down at the end of the second term.
Oh, really?
But there were just a couple lingering things I wanted to see through, especially the Birch Creek Park up by the Old South, where Birch Creek Elementary is now.
Oh, yeah.
And, and then we won, Mayor Porter, and we and myself were very interested in getting a skate park. And that's on tap to be constructed. And so
that's great.
there are lots of great amenities. We put the city the city's in a good place.
Mm-hmm.
We're really trying to look ahead and see where the city's headed, and we put together a plan in order to meet those needs, where we take a look at, okay, this is an aging city. What water projects need to be accomplished in the next 4 or 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
When do we need to buy a new fire truck? And so we're actually projecting out our costs into the future so that we can plan now for what we need later.
Yeah.
Too often, especially in young cities, you go out west to some of these newer cities, and they don't even have a tax on property at all.
Oh.
And the developers put in all the infrastructure, the water lines, the sewer lines, and so you have time. But you got to start thinking and looking ahead to meet those needs. And and every once in a while you get a surprise. We have a newer neighborhood that the soils were hot, which corroded the pipes, and we just put $1 million into that neighborhood.
The soils were hot?
Yeah.
Like they're not wet enough?
Acidic.
Oh.
So
okay.
it corrodes.
Oh, okay.
When we say hot, we mean it corrodes.
Okay.
And sometimes, like with cement, they'll say it's hot. That's why it will sometimes flake off the top.
Mm.
And that's because the chemical reaction has already started to create the concrete, and you lay it a little, Anyway, I don't want to get into a construction discussion, but you really have to prepare for that. Did I even answer your question? I'm sitting there thinking.
Kind of, yeah.
I get going sometimes, and then I go over here and then over here.
It's good. I think you answer it in an indirect way, but you answer it. But I'm curious because city government seems to be maybe the least involved in education as far as the levels of government. So I don't know. Did you think that was going to be something you were going to be able to affect at the time, or is it just more of I'm branching out into new things, parks and stuff, obviously?
I think that staying out of trouble is getting into trouble, and so like I said, I was relieved of coaching, and I said I'm going to run. John Bradley steps down. Otherwise, I would have lost. John was the incumbent, well respected. And this time I said, you know what? it's time to step down. And there was concern from some saying, you can't leave. We have to have it. I said, you know what? The cemeteries are full of people who thought the world couldn't do without them. and that's the truth.
Yeah.
And you know, there was an individual that won, and I don't know if he would have, or that person would have won if I hadn't stepped down. Mm-hmm. But now they have the opportunity. They have the opportunity, and they've already found ways to serve. And I thought, you know what? It's time for me to let someone else serve. Plus, my family was about to rebel because I didn't know I was running for the state school board. And so the fall before we had the municipal election, we're coming into March, and I get a text, hey, what do you think about running for the state school board? And then 5 minutes later, another person, so-and-so, has decided not to run. And I had a great relationship with the current board member. Jenny Gravitt had done it. She's an excellent representative, great teacher. I'd had several of my own children in her class at Sandridge. Yeah. But I just had that opportunity, and and I said, I'll do it. And I ran, and it's been a wonderful experience. But now at first I was teaching, city council, state school board. Yeah. And that weighed in a little bit too. Yeah. Because that would have meant campaign this fall, and now next year. And the cycle for the election is much longer in state races. Mm. You have to declare, you have the party convention, then you have primary election, then you have the general election. And so I just remember the first time I ran for state board, I actually lost. And I actually built great relationships with the opponents, or most of the opponents. But I just remember telling my kids, hey, I'll buy you a Subway, I'll take you to Taco Time or whatever. If you'll come and put door hangers up for me. And after about the fifth time, they said, Dad, we don't want to do it anymore. And my wife is an educator, and she says, you know what, I want to support you in this, but we got to limit it a little bit. So
yeah, no, I don't know if anybody could handle 2 elections like that. That would be
insane. It's back to back. It kind of reminds me of when you're running for the House. Running for the House of Representatives, both at the national and the state level, you're always campaigning. Right. That is so tough. So I respect those who serve and do that. It's a tough thing.
Well, and so do I understand that timeline right, that you got onto the state school board before it became partisan? Is that right?
No, we were the first partisan election.
That was the first one.
But it really hadn't taken hold. There was a little push from different elements, but 2022 is when it really, when the real push came, where lots of money came into the scenario. So I'm actually in the process right now where I've been contacted and, hey, are you running? Hey, we want to help. Right. Let us know how we can help. So things are much different this time around.
Well, and that's kind of what I was curious about. Like, I would think going from, you ran a few nonpartisan races, and then you go to the partisan ones, and there's these different dynamics going on, different people checking in with you and stuff.
Yeah.
Did the city council races, was there ever a really competitive one?
Oh, yeah. My first time, it was, the turnout was low because that was before mail-in ballots. Oh. So it was like 10 to 15%. Yeah. Now it's bumped up quite a bit. But that second election, there was lots of controversy. There were only 4 candidates, so there's no primary. Oh. There was the heavy issues, and we were all within very close. Mm. It was tight. And yeah, it was a tough election.
And so then you're out there like knocking doors and all that?
Oh yeah, I tried to knock every single door in South Ogden.
Mm. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did, and it's interesting. People would talk to you about the issues, and the only issue that we keep trying to do, and it's the same for the last 12 years, is code enforcement.
Oh.
How does your neighbor's lawn and yard look, and do they park their vehicle on their lawn?
Uh-huh.
And, we want our city to look good, but that is a real challenge. And sometimes it's someone disabled, and we say, hey, can we get a group together and go help this person?
Uh-huh.
Because community is community, and school board, it's community, but it's not personal.
Yeah.
And I like personalized politics better than anything. So I love it when someone calls me. I don't get a lot of calls. I do get some. And I've been able to help people work through some issues. And most time what appears to be very confrontational, once you get down to it, there's a lot of good people. We just got to talk it out, and things will work out fairly for everyone. And I think most of the time that's the case.
Yeah.
I remember one time I went down to change the water, and someone had taken the water. They turned it down the ditch. But we had to get the water to our cornfield. And, it's silage for the cows, for the dairy cows in the winter.
Uh-huh.
But I went, Storm and Dad had a mechanic shop, and Dad, they stole our water again. And I turned it back into ours. And I was just saying some really mean things about the guy. And Dad said, you know what? Most of the time, we just need to talk things through, and there's probably a misunderstanding.
Uh-huh.
Turns out, guy was an old military guy. He saw it was 6 p.m., not 600 hours. And so he thought he was getting his water at 6 a.m.
Right.
And it was really 6 p.m. And he apologized, and we moved on.
Uh-huh.
Later, that guy hired me to work his farm for him. And I did that all through high school and even into my college years. And my younger brother took over after I was up to Utah State. And so, he became one of my best friends. And then he became a professor at Snow College for me, and I got to know him on that level. So, man, you know what? Most times people are good.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just need to sit and talk about things.
Yeah, right. I have this firm opinion that a lot of people's negative feelings about government in general is just lack of exposure, and they don't know the deliberation that goes into all of the decisions, and so if you can just give them a little bit of exposure to even just let them know that you thought about it before you acted, because they'll just assume you didn't.
Agreed. In fact, I was listening to one of your podcasts, and there was actually a politician on there, and sometimes I felt like we're on opposite sides of the universe. But when I listened to him on the show, what really struck me is that's exactly how I think.
Uh-huh.
I think the same way.
Right.
And yet, sometimes that communication,
Mm-hmm.
we get caught up.
Yeah.
Or we're expecting the conflict. We're expecting that person to be contrary when we're really close.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. In fact, I worked with Jen Gravitt a while back.
Oh, okay.
Probably 6-7 years ago. So we've been friends, and I've, just kind of followed her from a distance. So then I found out you got her office, and I was like, oh, I wonder if there was like a thing. And so I'm so happy when I hear it,
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
She chose not to run.
Uh-huh.
In fact, when I said, I've been contacted. I hear you're not running, but I am not going to put in unless I'm not going to run against you.
Right.
And we're on different ends of the political spectrum when it comes to some issues, but I don't think we're on opposite ends when it comes to education.
Right.
And that's what I found is when it comes to education, we should be able to get along. And so when she won the first time, I thought that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while I'd send her a note and say, hey, you're doing great. And
Yeah.
that, why should we You know, we should be able, when it comes to education, we should be able to get along.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Right. And most things, I think, we'll find,
right.
a lot of assumptions you're making just aren't correct.
Yep.
Campaigning, you must have then run into a bunch of students, probably heard a bunch of stories about weird things people remembered about you.
You know, people remember themselves as being crazier than I remember them being crazy.
Right.
But when I was running, students said, I saw your sign. I took it because I wanted to put it on my wall.
I would have.
And
I would have thought of it. I would love to have one.
But, you know, years ago, I had a group of boys that came through, and we became good friends, not in a professional way.
Right.
And they would always ask, they wouldn't bring a pencil to class. And so I constantly give them pencils to them. And every once in a while I tease them. I didn't expect the pencils to ever come back, but every once in a while I give them a pencil and say, when am I going to get these pencils back? Well, anyway, it's about mid-July. At that time we were living in Brigham, and I commuted down to South Junior High, and I got a package in the mail, and inside were these little pencils. It said, we're returning the pencils.
That's good.
I laughed about that, and every once in a while I see each one of those young men. They become just great people, just amazing people. And I'll remind them of that story. In fact, one's he repairs my appliances, like your refrigerator and things. And I usually end up with him when I call on the warranty, but just to see him and to reminisce, and the other's been a police officer, in fact retired, and it's just amazing to see the success. And that's the thing I love most is on the state school board, I want to make good policy so we can help these young people become the best they can be.
Yeah. Well, great. I think we hit it all. I really appreciate it. I thought that was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.